Okay, well, no, 2 minutes to go. Sorry, just look at the screen. 2 minutes. Sorry, I'm like.
Yeah, if I want to say something different. You're 58. No, right.
I'll just wait a little bit further.
Yeah, which I found. Yeah, what?
No, Jeff wasn't here. We cannot start.
Hi, Councillor Saint-Pierre, can you hear me?
Did you avoid the duct?
Yes, I did. I was explaining why I was not a lion and cowered it out. And it's just.
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you, Chris.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no kidding.
They had torches and they were going after. Okay.
Yeah, you don't want the dunk tank next to tar and feathers.
You were in the dunk tank last year. Yes, I just about drowned in the dunk tank, just so you know. The fastball girls. Line up. And then they stood beside the thing if the girl missed, and they just pushed her in. I think you went and smelled it. Oh, I mean, in the number. Yeah. You know, I always get hurt too. I always come down, I find a big bruise or a cut in my arm. It's good, you know, it's not easy. It doesn't cushion the blow, eh?
All right. 1 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order. So we'll start by recognizing that we are trying to make good decisions for the land on the unceded territories of people who have made good decisions for the land for a long, long time. So let's try and do as best we can. Okay, so I'd like to move on to the approval of the agenda. If I could have someone move that. Okay, so moved by Ms. Ritz and Councillor Beddoes. And all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. Adoption of the minutes. Any change to the minutes at this point? Anybody? Seeing none, I'd like a motion. Okay, moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, we have a public question and comment period, and we have public here. No? Oh, damn. Okay, well, I was all excited for a second. All right, I guess not. Okay. So moving right along to reports. I think Mr. Riley. Not sure. Oh, no, I was wrong. Ms. Matusi.
Thanks. I have a bit of a cold, so if my voice just completely leaves me, Jade will have to take over. So item 6.1 is a development variance permit to vary section 2.2A of the subdivision and development standards bylaw 404, to vary required road cross-section improvements that are a condition of an active subdivision application at 1245 Silver Spray Drive. Okay, the subject property is accessible from East Sooke Road via Gillespie Road and Highway 14. It lies within the community growth boundary and is outside the sewer specified area. The property is a 47 hectare hooked lot that has 3 road frontages: Birdsong Lane, Thornton Heights, and Silver Spray Drive. The southern portion of the property within the blue square on the slide is vacant and the location of a future 9-lot Bearland Strata subdivision. The northern portion of the property within the green square is the site of a private utility. So the subject property is located within Area B of the Silver Spray Comprehensive Development Zone. Area B permits low-density residential development, a golf course, a private utility, and a storage yard. Areas A and C of the CD3 zone allow for uses such as a marina, hotels, lodges, single-family dwellings, health spas, and a tourist accommodation. The subject property is designated as a comprehensive development land use in the official community plan, or OCP. Comprehensive development, or CD land use designations, are applied to large areas of land with CD zoning. They guide a cohesive plan for an area that may include a mix of housing types, commercial and infrastructure uses that are not typically captured in one zone or in a typical OCP land use designation. The subject property is This slide shows the required cross-section for the Silver Spray area. In accordance with bylaw 404, the required cross-section standard for Silver Spray is the local urban suburban cross-section. The cross-section requires an 18-meter wide road right-of-way, 4.25 meter wide travel lanes, a 2-meter wide sidewalk, non-mountable curb and gutter, a 2.7 wide boulevard that separates the car travel lanes from the sidewalk, street lighting, and street trees. And some background for this property. As mentioned, the subject property is a hooked lot with 3 road frontages: Birdsong Lane, Silver Spray Drive, and Thornton Heights. 1245 Silver Spray. 1245 Silver Spray has an active application, and as a condition of the subdivision, the owners, sorry. So 1245 Silver Spray, so 2024, the owners were granted a variance for 160-meter portion of Birdsong Lane that connects to the foreshore. The variance modified the required local urban suburban cross-section to allow for a construction of a nature trail, stairs, and a parking area to service the trail. Under the same application, the owners obtained a variance to the 100-meter portion of Birdsong Lane that connects to Silver Spray Drive. The variance allowed for an 18-meter wide cross-section with a 3.5-meter wide travel lane, a 2-meter wide sidewalk, non-mountable curb and gutter, and a 1-meter wide boulevard, street lighting, and street trees. So the owners are now seeking a variance to modify the required road improvements for the remaining road frontages of the subject property. The proposed cross-section for 57 meters on Thornton Heights is as follows: an 18-meter wide cross-section, 2 to 3 meter wide gravel pathway in lieu of a sidewalk, a 3-meter wide vehicle travel lane, curb and gutter, no boulevard except where permitted by topography, no street lighting, and retaining the existing trees, not planting any new ones. The proposed varied cross-section for 265 meters on Silver Spray Drive is an 18-meter wide road cross-section, 2 to 3 meter wide gravel pathway, again in lieu of the sidewalk, 3.5-meter wide vehicle travel lanes, a curb and gutter, no boulevard, no street lighting, and again to retain the existing trees. This slide just shows a comparison of the proposed application, what is being proposed through this variance and what is required in bylaw 404. So proposed to the variance is a 2 to 3 meter wide gravel travel lane adjacent to the vehicle lanes. No boulevard, retain the existing 3.5-meter vehicle travel lanes and a 3-meter wide travel lane for Thornton Heights. No street trees and no street lights. What is required is a 2-meter wide sidewalk separated from the boulevard, 2.75 meter wide boulevard, 4.25 meter wide travel lanes, street lights, and street trees. So in conclusion, staff's recommendation is that LUDC recommend that council deny the proposed variance and require the applicant to improve the road standard to meet the transportation master plan and the SDS bylaw 404. Staff feel that the reduced travel lane width, alongside with a lack of boulevard separating pedestrians from vehicles, is a risk to pedestrians and to vehicles. This will only be exacerbated if there are no streetlights in the area, where zoning allows for a hotel, tourist accommodation, a health spa, restaurant, a marina, and a golf course, to list a few of the allowed uses. A gravel pathway in lieu of a hard surface sidewalk may limit mobility for those who require mobility aids to get around, and the gravel pathway will also have to be maintained by the city and may be more difficult to maintain than a hard surface sidewalk. In addition to staff's recommendation to LUDC, there are 2 alternative motions for LUDC to consider recommending to council. One is to approve the proposed variance, development permit variance. This is the applicant's request, that the Land Use and Development Committee recommend that council authorize the issuance of the development variance permit PLN 02019 to permit a modified frontage improvements along a 57-meter portion of Thornton Heights and a 265-meter portion of Silver Spray Drive as an alternative to the local urban suburban cross-section required under section 2.2A of the Subdivision and Development Standards bylaw 404. And that the modified cross-section include an 18-meter wide road cross-section, 2 to 3 meter wide gravel pathway in lieu of a sidewalk, a curb and gutter, no boulevard, an existing 3.5 meter wide travel lane, 3 meters for Thornton Heights, no street lighting, and the retention of the existing trees. Or alternative motion 2, postpone consideration. As an alternative, the Land Use and Development Committee may consider recommending that council postpone consideration of the variance and direct staff to work with the applicant to develop a revised proposal that addresses the identified concerns related to pedestrian and vehicle safety. A draft motion would be as follows: that the Land Use and Development Committee recommend that council postpone authorizing the issuance of the development variance permit PLN 02019 and direct staff to work with the applicant to develop an alternative proposal that addresses the noted concerns regarding pedestrian and vehicle safety. Just administratively, the proposal will be sent for notification to align with the Local Government Act and the district's procedures bylaw, wherein 10 days prior to council, a notice will be mailed out to owners and residents of the properties within 100 meters of the subject property. Any correspondence received will be directed to council by corporate properties as part of the council agenda package. Staff's recommended motion is that the LUDC recommend that council deny the proposed variance to section 2.2A of the subdivision development standards bylaw 404, which seeks to modify the required frontages as a condition of subdivision along with 57-meter portion of Thornton Heights and a 265-meter portion of Silver Spray Drive adjacent to the subject property located at 1245 Silver Spray Drive and legally described as Lot 1, Section 78, Sooke Land District, Plan EPP 93249. Thank you. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. I guess at this point, we'll be looking for any questions for staff. And I think that is this gentleman here to speak? Okay. So at some point, let me think. Would it be preferable to have this gentleman speak and then have questions or thoughts? Yeah, no. Yep, okay. So if you'd like to step up at this point in time. Don't forget to hit the little button in the middle. And your name, please.
Hear me okay? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and councillors and other members on the committee. I've worked in Sooke a bunch of years and I don't recall ever Philip Buchanan with J.E. Anderson representing the owner of the property. So I've worked in Sooke quite a few years and I don't recall asking for a road frontage development variance permit anywhere in Sooke except on Silver Spray Drive and East Sooke Road. In other words, this road between that gives access to the resort. Every month I talk to clients about their concerns about the road frontage improvements, and I support council. I support the bylaw that it's important to have road frontage improvements for safety and other issues, but I do have difficulty on Silver Spray Drive. It's a rural road. And I have some plans here that maybe I won't share yet. I didn't expect such a formal gathering, so I didn't prepare slides for the group, but most of you would know the area. It's typically a 7-meter wide rural road with trees either side, a narrow ditch, and in many areas, fairly high rock cuts. And in this area, there's along the frontage of the property we're considering, I believe that there's anywhere from no rock cuts, but typically 3 meters to 5 or 6 meter rock cuts that would be generated by this proposal along the frontage of this property. And it's not going to look pretty. It doesn't fit the rural character. And I think that the Land Use Committee and council should consider the rural character and what's really going on out there. Years ago, the rezoning of the resort was approved, and the plan was to have, and still is, to have a trail connecting the resort and the marina that allows golf carts, people, bicycles to hike in a nature environment between the resort and the marina. And I believe there was one restaurant at the marina. Now, between the marina and the resort, which I acknowledge is a lot of units, but between the resort and the marina, there's 2 kilometers of rural road, and perhaps staff can bring up the zoning bylaw plan, the one that shows area B as green. Thank you. So you can see the orange down at Sooke Point where the resort is. You can see the blue at the top where the marina is. And in between is the green area, which is quite rural. Lots of trees, not too many houses. And That's what it is. And it's about 2 kilometers long. And there's a connection from that resort area to the marina via an off-road trail already. Now, I support safety. I support a curb and gutter. I support a gravel sidewalk, 2 to 3 meters wide. We want to do this right, but I don't believe that a blasting a further 3 meters back into the cliff, taking out a number of trees, I believe the number of significant trees was 19, and then leaving a harsh landscape with a steep rock cut, just so that we can have a grass boulevard between the curb and the sidewalk. I think that's wrong. And I'd like the committee to consider that and make a recommendation to council. Okay, so I can answer any questions, but that's my lengthy discussion at the start.
Thank you very much. Before Mr. Buchanan steps down, does anyone have any questions for him?
I think I've got a lot of evolving questions, but,
Might come up later.
yeah, they'll come up during the session. So because we're committee, we can access. Okay.
Because we're in committee, I'll ask through the chair, we can access the applicant throughout the discussion, right? It's not like a formal council meeting, so
I think if I allow it.
if the chair,
We can come back and ask the applicant further questions.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so if you want to have a comfy seat for now.
Sure. And I have pictures. I won't break them out, but if there are questions, I can support them with pictures and so on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, any questions for staff? Ms. Cumming.
Through the chair, right? Is that right? I have a question. I know at the beginning you said it was a local urban / suburban designation. And I was looking before this meeting at the transportation master plan. And when I look at that area, it's a low growth potential and it's a local road. So why does it get designated as urban suburban, not rural? Like, is that on? Like if I look at, sorry, I have the little picture of the roads, the little cross sections. It's just a general question. How did it get designated as urban, suburban / rural? Is that is it on a different map that I'm not looking at? If that makes sense?
Yeah,
As someone from, yes,
it's through the chair. Manager of engineering is actually here and
perfect.
she can answer that question.
Thank you.
Through the chair, the urban, suburban, local area is based on the community growth area in the OCP. So anything within that would be a local, suburban, urban, unless it's a collector or ulterior. I just lost that word.
Arterial.
But outside of that is rural. So anything outside the urban growth area is considered rural. This is within the urban growth area.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. That can't be it.
I got one.
Okay, and then Councillor Pearson.
Oh, okay.
Through the chair, to staff, in the recent variance that we granted, which I say recent within the last 18 months, it was the same for the same type of cross section, right? And in continuation, what was the length of that variance? I don't remember. I was trying to look it up this morning, but I couldn't remember how many meters that was.
100, I believe.
Was 100?
Double check it.
Yeah, but it was that continuation of that same piece, right? Coming from the marina, but on the top end of Silver Spray, if I remember. Yes, at the top. Okay. So about 100 meters, is that the answer?
To be confirmed by staff, but that was my recollection.
Yeah, through the chair. If you're referring to Birdsong Lane, I've put it up on the slide.
Yep.
So if that's the one you're referring to,
Yep.
there have been other variances in the Silver Spray area that we have issued
Right.
for various road lengths and at various times.
Okay.
Yeah,
And that variance that we granted, and I don't remember the date, that was the same type of application, like for the gravel trail, if I can remember, and -1 curb and gutter, is that right?
through the chair. This one in particular was not. This one was for Birdsong Lane where they actually did do a sidewalk connecting the cul-de-sac to Silver Spray, and the other portion of that road, because it is a dedicated road, but we made it a trail, or so that will be a trail with parking lot and stairs.
Okay.
We did issue one, and let me just go through the slides here. So these are some of the recently issued ones for Birdsong Lane. This is the marina. I believe this one was issued in 2021. I can't see that far, unfortunately, on the slide. In this case, we did do a gravel trail, and much the same as they're requesting now through the variance. And this was for the marina, we did a parking lot portion. This is for the road right away. This was the trail, narrower boulevard on the opposite side of it's very much the same. This was the parcel just south of that on 1361. This one was issued, I believe, in 2024.
Yeah.
Again, the same general variance.
How long was that one in 2024 that week?
I don't believe. Let's see if I have that exact length.
I think it was, I'm gonna say it was more than 100 meters, but. Probably, okay, so, but through the chair to staff, it was for, and probably the applicant's gonna get this question eventually. It was for the same reason, was for the rock cut that they would have to blast, if I can remember correctly. That was part of that discussion.
I think similar rationale provided, but it's hard to say at this point.
Yeah.
We can speak to it.
And all done, or?
Yeah, still more questions, but it's again, it's the same concept of blasting out that big rock and keeping some rural character. That's, I mean, the crux of the application. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, back in April 22nd, 24, we had the 5 variances came to us, and 3 of them were dealt with, and now we've got these final 2. And indeed, I think, well, our minutes, of course, don't indicate really the extent of the discussion, but I know the rural character piece. However, so I have a question here. Silver Spray Drive crosses into an RU3 area. So in the RU3 section of Silver Spray Drive, would that be a local rural road requirement in that section?
Through the chair, I will direct that again to the manager of engineering.
Okay, but the section we're talking about is designated local suburban.
That's true.
And that's currently so in the current subdivision and bylaw, development standards bylaw number 925. In the feedback that came to staff during the engagement process, was any mention made of this fact that what is it on bylaw map book page number 25, which does cover Silver Spray, it is indicated to be a suburban collector. Yeah, was there any feedback at all on that?
During the consultation process? No.
Okay. Yeah, it's a lot to take in, these big documents. Yeah, and then back to the the marina area where a gravel path was approved, gravel trail. That's alongside angled parking, is it not? Up at that section?
Through the chair, parking was approved, roadside parking was approved as part of that variance on the same
Right.
portion. I'm not sure if it's angled parking.
So that changes the so it's not an apple to apple comparison here.
It's not for this section, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I went out and had a look at it, the last group of variances. In fact, I've met the gentleman out there to discuss it. And when we discussed the Birdside Lane, it was a lane. It's just sort of a road offshooting. It is not the main thoroughfare, which is Silver Spade Drive. So Silver Spade Drive is the main collector route. This whole area is going to be building out. So I'm a little bit, I don't want to use the comparison of Birdside Lane to Silver Spray Drive. They are apples and oranges. So I'm not getting an accurate picture of why we would not like streetlights, why we would not want sidewalks there when you know, we're committed to accessibility. That's one of our standards here at council. And to put a gravel pathway in instead of a sidewalk doesn't work when it comes to accessibility. So I have a lot of concerns about this variance. We granted previous variances and they made some sense when you're dealing with some small offshoot roads. But the main road, it's going to be serviced in the future. And we have, and councils have in the past, done some short-sighted things that we pay for today. To me, it's important that we do this right and we get it right the first time, because I don't want to look back in 20 years. It would be very sad for me in 20 years, but that we oops this, because it may be a little bit too difficult to put street lights in and a sidewalk. I'm sorry, I can't support this variance. So I don't know, maybe that was a statement and not a question, but it just not sitting right with me. So that's it for now.
Thank you, Councilor Beddoes. I'd like to go to Mr. Barry and Ms. Ritz afterwards, see if there are any questions and comments, please.
Thank you. Mr. Buchanan, I was just wondering if you could describe verbally what the road is going to be used for into the future, on the left side, on the right side. It sounds like you got a cliff side on one side. I am fairly familiar with that area. I've done some work out there. I'm just wondering, is there lots on the one side that are going to be developed, or are they already developed, and what's there now and what's going to be going on in the future?
Thank you. The property, as you can see on the screen, the area where this frontage variance is being proposed, that one that was up there was good. There you go. That's fine. Anyway, on either side of the road along the frontage, it's a 3.5 meter wide paved surface, about a 0.5 meter shoulder, and a 2 meter wide ditch, 2 to 3 meters. And we've got about 2 to 3 meters typically between the edge of pavement and the toe of the cliff. And that ditch boulevard area has been left with limited maintenance, and it's got scrub trees growing up, some good firs, but the main trees that exist, and behind that 2 to 3 meter wide level area, there's a rock face, and that's very typical in this section. Now, we talked, or Councillor Pearson talked about the other area down on what we call the monument lots, where we proposed a curb and a gravel sidewalk. There were some rock faces, but there were some very nice old trees, like significant nice trees. And we proposed a gravel sidewalk, because if you put a concrete sidewalk over roots, you've got to dig out all the soil, put in hard gravel, and damage the roots. Whereas if we stuck in that location with a gravel surface, we were able to limit the damage to the roots on these big trees. And that's why that was a gravel surface. In this case, we don't really have many major trees at the lower level. What we have is the 2 or 3 meter boulevard, which has a ditch and scrub, and then a rock face with the fir trees at the top of this rock slope. And that rock slope goes anywhere from 0 to, I don't think I'm exaggerating, where there'll be a 6 or 8 meter rock face along much of it if we blast it back. Right now, we can fit this sidewalk, whether it's a gravel surface or concrete, we can fit that between the edge of pavement and that rock edge and not create a new high rock face. And there's lots of places through the property, through the whole Silver Spray, but in particular this spot where we have a tight canyon and the road sort of winds through in a rural setting, and we'd like to keep that. And I think there are decisions to make about the aesthetics of the property and the neighborhood and what wants to be there. The big question to me is, does the road need to be widened from 3.5 meters to 4.25 meters? I do support a curb to protect the sidewalk, and we want a sidewalk. Now, does it need to be concrete? It could be concrete. That's not a big dollar item. Do we need streetlights? I'm not sure that the urban streetlight scenario in this setting is correct. I don't think we're asking for a lot of change except to keep the road a bit narrower and move that sidewalk to the road. That's really what it is. And not blast that cliff out and take out 20 trees along the top of it. So we still get left with as much boulevard. There's just as much boulevard, but instead of having an urban grass boulevard 2.5 meters wide between the curb and the sidewalk, we've got a rural, rocky, forested rock face above the sidewalk. Okay, so we still have the boulevard, it's just different.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt and ask, do you think your question's been answered at this point, or?
Yeah, I guess my concern was what kind of population is going to be happening there at the end of the development? In other words, how many vehicles, people will be traveling that road and those sidewalks when the development is fully phased in?
For this proposal, there will be no additional driveways onto Silver Spring Drive. The additional roads, lots on this development are going down in Burnsong Lane. The larger development, I don't know what the zoning is, but it's significant. And that, are there, planning could probably help. Are there 300, 500 housing units or hotel units allowed on that? I'm not sure, but it's significant. And certainly the fact that there's 2 kilometers of rural road from the resort to the marina, and then another 14 kilometers of rural road along East Sooke Road, even to the 17-mile. There's some thought needed on what that road looks like. Does it need to be a suburban or urban? Does it need to be an urban road with a wide 18-meter platform? If I took a drive up.
I'm going to interrupt. At this point, I think
Sure.
that Mr. Barry's question has been answered, and I'd like to move on to see if there are any other questions. Or are you done, Mr.? Are you done? Okay, Ms. Ritz.
I suppose even if it ends up being a no vote, there's nothing to stop the developer from coming back with a plan B or C or D. Is that?
I think I can answer that. There is a third option where instead of actually saying no, which can actually tend to hold back development for a long time, there's an option to basically ask staff to work with the developers on an alternative proposal that might actually consider things like street light safety and so on and so forth. So we have yes,
Yeah,
no, and go back to the drawing board.
I understand that, but even with no, that option could be available. Right.
I'll send that question to staff.
I can respond through the chair. So yeah, with the denial, should LUDC recommend that council deny and then council subsequently denies the proposal, then the applicant couldn't reapply for a period of 6 months with the same application, but they could reapply with a modified cross-section. That's possible, but it would be a new application process. And it wouldn't be as streamlined as, say, receiving a resolution for postponement, guiding in that direction.
Okay. Gotcha.
Thank you.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think we're thinking 20 years ahead. The last couple of weeks, I've been walking a lot of sidewalks or a lot of not sidewalks in this town. And I know there are streets that in town probably thought they weren't going to be developed. And I know that we're talking over in East Sooke right now, but looking around Sooke 25, 30 years ago, whenever these streets were developed, I'm sure now they wish they had sidewalks. And that is the number one thing people are telling me: sidewalks, sidewalks, sidewalks. People want to go for a walk in the evening. They want to take their dog out. It's dark most of the year here. The after dinner walk is a very popular thing. And I think, sidewalks are kind of where you meet your neighbors. I don't know if there's a correlation, but it seems, and I've started to take note as I'm walking around, boulevards make a huge difference. Like I just feel safe walking there because the car isn't right beside me. And I've started to.
I'm going to interrupt for a moment and ask if there's a question, because that sounds like something different.
Okay, well, so I think if you're thinking 20 years ahead, maybe this isn't a question, it's just observations. Okay, then I can wait for observations later if you like, but Okay, but I think the infrastructure for streetlights is imperative. I mean, you could decide to dim them, but I feel that they should be there.
Got one for our applicant, Mr. Buchanan. I'm curious, this trail that leads from the marina to the resort. And I've taken a walk on it right in that area. And you say it's going to be suitable for bikes and pedestrians, but also mobility scooters and that sort of thing. It seems quite at the top of those rock cliffs, I believe. Yeah. Have I got a question there?
No.
Do you know where I'm going? Could you feedback on what I've just said?
I'll keep it brief.
Keep
if
it
you'd like.
brief, but also, is there a question?
Yeah, there is.
Okay.
It was right there.
Hmm.
About the nature of that trail.
All right.
It's 2 or 3 meters wide. It is a gravel surface. It's not suburban scooter friendly. It's more golf cart, mountain bike. Okay. So I won't pretend it's for everyone. It's more nature trail back in the trees.
Yes, through the chair to the applicant. You mentioned something about streetlights. Do you have any insight to your request of no streetlights? Like, was there feedback? Because I know no, I won't say that. I'll say, do you have any feedback?
Just that the intersections and important areas on that road where sight lines were deemed important, they have overhead lights, what I call a Cobra light, and they can be put in more areas. So if there is a desire for streetlights, if that's the vision that council and the community has for the areas to have, streetlights instead of night sky, that's a choice. And streetlights could be put in. That's aesthetics, it's not my idea for the neighborhood, but I won't pretend to decide for the community how it looks. I do feel strongly about the location of the sidewalk and the rock bluff and the extra blasting. That's all. Streetlights are not.
Thank you very much. Any other further questions for staff or for not the applicant, but, well, okay. No further questions? Oh, Councilor Pearson.
Yep, through the chair to staff. Anticipating, but not quite. Is there a workable solution having that sidewalk between the current rock face and our cross section? Through the chair.
Through the chair.
Yeah.
It would be working with the consultant because there would be probably things as a minimum we would look for. And then it might reduce the amount of rock cut, might be able to avoid that until we see what the minimum is and what we can work with. Should council support not following the bylaw or meeting the bylaw requirements, then it would be more of a discussion to see what we can get in, where we can't get it in, that sort of thing.
Okay, so the answer is potentially yes, or potentially maybe. Is that what you're saying?
We can always work with people, direction of council.
Well, I mean, I hear the applicant and I've driven that road and I'm not exactly sure where that rock cut is and I apologize, I didn't get out there this weekend. But I think I'd rather see that sidewalk be there, with a little bit of a buffer to the road than blasting the top of that rock off. Myself personally, and I know where that was, but
I'll assume that that's more of a comment at this point in time. And one last question, I'll ask a few of my own.
Okay, so I was curious, you've noted in the staff report that through you to you, Ms. Matusi, that it will be a responsibility of the district to maintain this gravel trail. Is there a possibility of a section 219 covenant to ensure that the Silver Spray itself takes responsibility for maintenance of the gravel trail?
Staff can answer, please.
Through the chair. We could draft that up as a condition of the variance to have a section 219 to have that enforced or, made sure that always happened would be quite a burden administratively, but it could be a condition. Yeah.
Thank you. I note Mayor Tate in the room. I was wondering if you had any questions. No, thank you. Okay, so at this point in time, I have a few questions of my own. I'd like to ask about multi-use trails. So what's being suggested here, I think, is a multi-use trail of some sort, but I've done a little bit of research and most of them tend to be paved often with asphalt. So I'm curious, what's our standard for multi-use trails at this point in the district?
Currently in the bylaw, our multi-use trails are 3 meters paved.
3 meters paved. Okay. So if this was going to be
Asphalt.
in asphalt. So if this was going to be a multi-use trail for mobility assist cyclists and pedestrians and so on and so forth, I think that's actually, I believe, the standard that the district is looking for at this point. I would just make note of that. I'm curious about the reduction on the road from, I think, 3 to 4.2 or whatever it is. I don't see the chief in the room, and that's fine. I'm curious if that has any impacts at all on the engines getting through, anything like that. Does anybody know? Oh, I missed that. So what did it say?
Thank you, through your chair. Travel lane 3.5 meters or less will require the installation of no parking signage along the right of way. So obviously 3.5 meters is actually the bare minimum when it comes to a fire truck.
Okay, so as soon as you have people parking on the side, the fire trucks might not get through.
That's right. And, we have to have it enforced too, so.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Beddoes. Does this cross-section include cycling trail? Like basically, is the trail meant to use, are cyclists meant to use the trail? Or are we reducing the road and then you don't have cycling lanes? Is that the idea? Through staff?
Through the chair, typically if there is a sidewalk on a local road, the road pavement's 8.5 meters. That allows for bikes and one side roadside parking. As an alternative, if you were going to use them up and it was separated, then you could go to a narrower lane. There is narrower lanes on other cross sections as opposed to the local, but the local is wider to allow for parking and bikes.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think that covers most of my bigger questions.
Excuse me, through the chair.
Yes.
Our director, Chris Marshall, is on Zoom and he has his hand up.
Oh, I didn't see that, obviously. So, Mr. Marshall?
Can you hear us, Mr. Marshall?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
We certainly can.
We can't see you though, but that's okay.
Okay, great. So just for the members of the committee that may not be as familiar with road frontage requirements and the need for them. So the reason that we asked for road frontage requirements at the time of subdivision like this is that it requires the applicant who's getting the benefit of the development of the land to pay for that road frontage at the time of subdivision. If that developer does not pay for that road frontage and that road frontage does not get developed to its standard, then down the road, 20 years down the road, when that work does need to get done because of future development in the area, the general taxpayer has to pay for that frontage improvement. So, that's why the bylaw requires it. This is an area in which south of this, or I guess east of this, there's going to be a great deal of development. We have applications in hand right now, or in the process of being put in place. We can't talk about it because it's not an actual application right now, but there's already multifamily development out at Sooke Point. There's marinas, hotels, there's a golf course, that's being proposed. There's other large developments with a great deal of traffic being proposed for that area. This road will need to have a full standard at some point in time. So either the applicant is paying for it at this point as part of their required development process, or the community is paying for it later. So that's why we have this in a bylaw, and that's why it's important to hold the developers' feet to the fire on these kinds of things, because it's something that, as council's well aware, we are fighting with tax increases every year, and these are very expensive upgrades that are needed. And it's a great deal of disturbance if you have to do it later once all the development's already in place. So just for the members of the committee that may not be aware of that sort of background.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Okay, if you could have a seat, please. Okay, so at this point in time, if we can, I'd love to have a motion on the floor and then we can actually discuss the motion. Councilor Beddoes.
I'd like to move that we deny the variance. I'll make the motion that we deny the variance permit as per. Do I have to read it out? Would you like me to read it out?
Sure, or I'll do it. Well, that's not it.
That the Land Use Development Committee recommended council deny the proposed variance to section 2.2A of subdivision development standards bylaw number 404. I'm gonna keep going.
Yeah,
Which
please
seeks to modify the required frontage improvements as a condition of subdivision along the 57-meter portion Thurton Heights and the 265-meter portion of Silver Spray Drive adjacent to the subject property located at 1245 Silver Spray Drive and legally described as Lot 1, Section 78, Sooke Land District, Plan Number EPP 93249. That's my motion.
Thank you. You may now breathe. Anyone to second that? Seconded by Member Ritz. Okay, so now I'm looking for discussion. Actually, first to motivate.
Yeah, first. Well, I understand it's going to be difficult, and I like I say, I'm familiar with the property. I went out and had a look at it, and I understand the rock faces and that concern. But I go back to what Mr. Marshall said, our staff, that we pay staff to give us advice. And I'm looking here at the engineering report, which we pay staff to give us all the information they can. And they have come through that to deny this. And the reason being is this Silver Spray Drive is going to be a significant road in the future. And it's not fair to put it on the taxpayers 20 years down the road. So the builder is going to, or developer is going to reap some profit, hopefully. But I think we better start getting some of these roads in the proper shape, because again, I go back to what Ms. Ritz said, walking around, and it's been my bugaboo for going on 8 years now, as we made some decisions in the past that come back to haunt us today. And I don't want this to be one of them. So I'm not in favor of this. I think lighting is important for safety. And that's what we're talking about. That's what the engineer's saying here. It's for safety reasons. It's not for aesthetics. And a sidewalk. I mean, those trails, gravel trails, and I've been with Mr. Lajeunesse, a previous councillor, now the MLA, and saw the difficulty he has getting around on gravel trails and grass. So sidewalks are important for connectivity for the handicapped people, and that's something we committed to in this council. So the things that are, I mean, why wouldn't you want to put lights up? Just sidewalk. I don't know. It's pretty basic stuff to me. So that's where I stand on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you. The seconder.
I don't have a lot to add to that, actually. I do think we're planning 20 years in the future, and I think we have a responsibility to make good decisions. And I think this will be a good decision. As I mentioned, people love to go for a walk. They're going to have dogs. It's going to be quite a high-end area, which I think will meet a lot of slightly older people wanting to go golf, wanting to, it's going to have vacation rentals and things like that with families. So sidewalks just make sense. Lighting makes sense. I mean, you can decide to dim it at certain times or turn it off at a certain time if you want, but putting the infrastructure in now just makes sense to me.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson. St. Pearson, sorry.
Thank you. I won't be supporting the motion because I heard that there was potential to make improvements without blasting the hillside and knocking the trees down. And maybe somewhere between the full build out, there's a compromise. I heard the applicant say he wasn't resistant to paving or concrete, the sidewalk. I heard the applicant say, he wasn't even worried about the lighting. It was more about the cross section of the road. If we can somehow negotiate that in a compromise and still maintain a safe road cross section with the sidewalk, then that would be the way that I would prefer to go. This is the all or nothing motion, which is our cross section. And sometimes in rural settings, our cross sections don't necessarily match the application. So thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Tate.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee. Just a few comments about this. I can appreciate why this has come forward in this way. And I hear, you know, the blasting, the impact on trees. On the other hand, we'll never be able to go back and fix it later. So if this area is all built out without these amenities, how are you going to blast it down the road to put in a sidewalk and the street lights? You're going to have to make do with what's there, which will become a challenge. While this is, you go through a rural area to get there, this is a place of high density commercial activity, marine hotel, tourist accommodation, which means people unfamiliar with the area will be coming and going. I've driven East Sooke Road, Gillespie, all the way to this point. It's very unpleasant at night. There's no sidewalks. The road crumbles off, which makes it, and if we treat it as rural, it'll be very difficult for the Wandahfuk electoral area director to advocate for improvements to that section of road because, well, it's rural, but it isn't, is it? The road to get there is rural in nature. The destination itself is high density urban. And so what are we doing here? If you look around other areas of Sooke without the infrastructure, the residents are asking for that infrastructure, and it's a piecemeal approach to get there, and it's going to take considerable time. So that's why I can see you're doing it now so that you don't have to come back later. Council was divided on this outcome, but in the end, the decision to grant the variance at the time or whatever that is passed, but it wasn't a unanimous outcome. So I'm just sharing the other perspective. With all the work that we have to do in the community, when will this area be designated for improvements? But the people that move there will be like, we're paying all this money in taxes. How come we don't have streetlights and sidewalks? And this gravel road, people are slipping on it, much like they are already on the gravel trail along near Steeplechase where that comes into Church Road. And now we have to find a way to pave the mouth, and that's where there's been changes to our trail infrastructure because people are skittering and falling on the existing multi-use trails that we have. Should the committee wish to, you know, the other outcome is to refer this back to staff. I'm just giving you a different alternative and to see what could be worked out with to have some amenities put in there. But I would just caution you against nothing because it'll be at the bottom of a list in a long time before this community has the ability to go back and fix a mistake that was made. Now, if you could go back in time, would you not have put in some street lights and sidewalks in multifamily areas when they were developed in Sooke? Rhodonite has barely any of them, and we haven't done anything on Rhodonite Road. Grant Road has nothing. Certainly you must hear or have heard from residents that are looking for improvements on that road. When are we going to get there? Imagine Sun River with no sidewalks or streetlights. And there are some areas in Sun River that have no sidewalks and you have traffic on the road and it's narrow with kids and dogs and strollers and the like. And when you're all able-bodied, everything is fine. Well, what if you're not? Are you going to be able to go and enjoy that sunset? How easy will it be to get there? How often do you hear from residents who can't walk on Whiff and Spit anymore because it's gravel and they can't use a wheelchair to get there? They can't enjoy the spit. Pushing somebody to the end of it is nearly impossible. I could barely do it with a baby carriage with all-terrain wheels. So it's just a perspective that In some areas that are defined as rural, it may make sense. It was interesting. We allowed for a reduction in frontage on an area in Casinos because the residents want no lighting, it's rural. Well, that was all fine until people started cutting off the highway and go flying down these roads. Then we hear, how come there's no sidewalks and streetlights here? Because now all this highway traffic is on our road. But we can't go back and fix that, can we? So the other alternative I would say is you could refer it back to staff and the applicant to see what another outcome is and see if there is some way of working in the middle. I'm just proposing that if you're stuck between one or the other, but it's not easy to go back. How are you going to blast a cliff when it's all built out? You're never going to be able to do it.
Thank you. Further, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, so, yeah, thank you everyone for your comments, and Mayor Tate, you've just said a lot. One thing that came to mind to me is that Silver Spray is quite a different ambiance and intention compared to, you mentioned Road Night and Sun River and other true suburban areas of Sooke. This has a charm and a character and an intentionality about it. I think there's a lifestyle that's being sold at Silver Spray. I think a 2 to 3 meter wide gravel trail, well maintained, perhaps, as I've suggested, at the expense of the landowner, which would be possible if we were to go with option B, which is to take it back to a negotiation effectively and start looking at these things. So there seems to be 4 key points in the engineering report arguing for denial. So that's the gravel trail costs. The absence of a boulevard may reduce pedestrian safety. Streetlights and streetlights in both. And so, yes, we as a council did have, excuse me. Yeah, we as council had discussed this and voted in a split vote last April and May, and we did grant the variances. That was indeed on a secondary road, a lane, Birdsong Lane. Yeah, I'm going to vote against this particular motion and hope that we move on to the next option.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. Mr. Berry?
Sorry, I just want some clarity on what we're actually voting on. Are we voting to and take it back to staff?
No, at this point it's denying the variance. Sorry, we're denying the variance at this point in time, or at least that's what's being discussed. If that goes forward, then the applicant would have to wait 6 months to try again, or would have to work with staff on a different option. Councillor Pearson.
Just for clarity, it goes to council first and then council.
Yes, of course.
With the recommendation from the
Of
land
course.
use committee. And then it would be denied or passed.
We are, after all, the committee, not the council. Thank you very much. I keep forgetting that. I wonder why. All right. Any further questions or comments?
Yeah, sorry. So if we vote against denying it, then we can say it can go back to staff, which is what the staff has recommended.
Yeah, we can pursue, we can follow other motions. We can go after other motions, and we would have to, because we did with some sort of resolution.
I mean, I believe professionals that have done all their work, they get paid to be a professional, they get paid to make these decisions, and they've made a decision to have it go back, and I would vote to have it go back to staff, yeah, to renegotiate, I guess is what it would be.
Thank you for that. I would point out that the actual staff recommendation is to deny the variance, not necessarily to go back, but Member Ritz?
That was my point. You
Okay,
just made it.
thank you. Okay, Ms. Cummings. Any comments or questions?
I don't think so. I agree with Rob and Kevin, and to wipe it straight to the bottom, I don't agree with.
Okay, so I'll make a few comments at this point in time. I think you have a number of reasons why quite frankly, we simply cannot go with the variance as it stands. First of all, I think that people are going to park on the road and you're creating an issue in terms of fire safety. That's all there is to it. That's not something that should be allowed. A gravel road, a gravel path is not actually good mobility. I would want to take that at least up to the district standards of a multi-use trail, which should be paved with asphalt. That's all there is to it. I'd also point out that when this was previously discussed in a lively discussion, it was pointed out that birdsong was not a precedent. So it should never be treated as a precedent. It is, of course, not a precedent. We can do whatever we want right now. It's not a precedent. I argued that was a precedent, but obviously I was wrong. I'll admit that now. There we go. I'd also like to keep in mind as we go forward that we're planning for the future. Whatever we decide does have an impact on the future. So for example, right now we're looking at a cross section that has boulevards on both sides, sidewalks on both sides, so on and so forth. Personally, I don't know if I like that, that particular cross section. I like a large multi-use trail with a boulevard and maybe no sidewalk on one side, but I think that's not necessarily, that's because I like cycling, and I find it's much easier to do on that kind of a surface. When we're planning for the future, we are looking at future taxpayers, future costs. We cannot go back. And if you go for the minimum, you will always have to go back. And what's being put forward in the variance as it stands is the bare minimum. Okay, gravel trails and so on, that's the bare minimum, which means that every other cost, and there are going to be future costs and future needs, the community is going to grow. The reason that we actually have a lot of these bylaws in place is because we don't necessarily know what the future holds, and the bylaws represent best practices in terms of bomb-proofing the future, in terms of actually having generally speaking, what we've discovered is the right sort of infrastructure for the future that covers most of what the future might hold for us. When we start changing that in easy ways, like the way I just did by saying, let's put in a big multi-use trail and throw this to the side without actually proper consideration, we're taking chances. So we know the sidewalks work, is what it boils down to. I will not be supporting the motion as it stands. Oh, sorry, I will be supporting this motion as it stands. I'll call the question. So this is to deny the variance. All in favor? Okay, the motion is defeated. Oh, so the motion carries. Motion carries, 4 and 3. Split, but motion carries. Damn it. I just finished talking. I've been trained. Stop talking, turn off the mic.
Might I suggest that you record the nay votes? Would you want your nays recorded?
Okay. Not in favor would be Councillor Pearson, Councillor Bateman, and Ms. Cummings. Now, at this point, we could entertain a motion to, I believe we can entertain a motion to ask staff to work with the applicant, correct? Nope. Then we're done. Sorry, back on turn.
Just one moment. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Jaden Riley, the Manager of Community Planning. I'm here to present an overview of the proposed engagement plan and preliminary edits to the working draft of the district's OCP. The purpose of this presentation is to provide a brief background and context for the OCP update process and present the proposed preliminary edits to the working draft of the OCP along with the associated engagement plan. These edits are focused in scope and serve 2 key objectives: to meet the statutory requirements introduced under Bill 44 and to address public and council feedback gathered during the most recent 2022 to 2023 consultation events. Today, we're seeking a recommendation from the committee to council to direct staff to proceed with the final phase of a public engagement using the updated working draft attached to the report. Yeah, so this timeline here provides a high-level overview of the OCP update process to date up until fall of 2023. So phase one, occurring from June to September 2020, involved foundational work, including background research and identifying key challenges that the OCP needed to address. Phase two, occurring between September 2020 and April 2021, included forming an advisory committee, envisioning and goal setting, along with the development of growth scenarios. This phase also included the first round of public engagement. Phase three, between April to October 2021, was the first draft, was when the first draft of the OCP was released and where public engagement was conducted on the draft, for which feedback was gathered and analyzed. Phase four, starting in October 2021 and leading us to the present, the OCP bylaw was given first and second reading, and public hearing was held all in 2022. Additional feedback was also sought through multiple committee of the whole meetings in 2023. The process was then paused in fall of 2023 in response to new provincial requirements introduced through Bill 44. Following the pause in fall of 2023, on January 27th of this year, Council endorsed an updated work plan for finalizing the OCP. A consultant was then retained through an RFP process to support this phase of the project, with a focus on public engagement and finalizing the document formatting and design. Since that time, staff have completed a preliminary review of the draft OCP, and a redline version of the draft and table of changes are included with the staff report as attachments 1 and 3. The proposed edits are largely technical in nature, focused on clarity, formatting, and aligning with legislation, while importantly maintaining the original vision, goals, and objectives of the document. From a legislative standpoint, the OCP must now be updated to comply with Bill 44 under the LGA. This includes policies that address the 20-year housing need and support small-scale multi-unit housing, or SMU. The deadline for compliance is December 31st of this year, which sets the timeline for completing this final phase of the update. The following slides provide an overview of the content of each part of the OCP, a summary of changes reflected in the working draft, and a summary of changes reflected in the working draft. So part one outlines the role and legal authority of the OCP and how it guides land use and development decisions in the district. This section also presents population, housing, employment statistics, providing important context for future growth and infrastructure planning. There's also a summary of how the OCP relates to other district plans, ensuring policy alignment across initiatives like the Transportation Master Plan and the Parks and Trails Master Plan. Finally, the regional context statement outlines how the OCP supports the goals of the CRD's regional growth strategy, which is a statutory requirement under the LGA. In terms of proposed changes to this part, we plan to update stats to reflect the most current available sources. These updates will be introduced in the clean version of the draft prior to engagement. Statutory references have also been revised for consistency with current legislation, including alignment with recent changes under Bill 44. Formatting and document structure improvements are proposed to enhance readability and ease of use, also to be reflected in the clean version of the draft prior to engagement. And importantly, no major changes are proposed in this part of the document. These changes help modernize and clarify the introductory sections of the OCP while maintaining their original intent and direction. Part two provides an overview of the OCP's vision, goals, and objectives, which remain the foundation of the plan. The vision, goals, and objectives are organized into 3 overarching goal areas, each supported by more detailed objectives. These objectives are later restated in individual policy sections in Part 3 of the document. These include the OCP's GHG reduction targets, which help align with broader climate commitments at the regional and provincial levels. Importantly, these elements were developed through initial community consultation during the early phases of the OCP, and together they guide all other policy areas in the plan, from housing to environmental protection. In terms of changes, the only update here is a reference to the district's 2022 Climate Action Plan, which reinforces the OCP's alignment with recent policy work. There are no changes proposed to the vision, goals, or objectives themselves. And part 3 outlines the district's long-term approach to growth and land use. The OCP sets out a growth management strategy that supports compact, efficient development patterns over the long term. The highest levels of growth are directed towards the town center and immediately surrounding areas, which support transit-oriented development, housing diversity, and more efficient servicing. The land use map, along with associated policies, establish where and how future development should occur, including infill, redevelopment, and new neighborhoods, and ensures alignment with infrastructure and environmental considerations. In terms of the draft edits, we reduced prescriptive language in some areas to allow for greater flexibility in how policies are interpreted and implemented. Language has also been revised to improve clarity and consistency with other district bylaws and strategic plans. It's important to note that no changes are proposed to the land use map itself, with the exception for those that have occurred since the second reading of the OCP. Otherwise, the existing structure and designations remain in place. These edits are intended to enhance usability and support policy alignment while maintaining the core direction of the OCP's growth strategy. Part 4 outlines the broad policy direction that shapes how we plan and deliver key systems and services in the community. It builds on the vision, goals, and objectives by translating them into specific guidance on areas like land use, infrastructure, public services, environmental management, and community amenities. These policies help day-to-day decision-making and longer-term planning, ensuring alignment across the district. Each policy area includes a set of supporting actions, which helps bring the goals to life. In terms of updates, we focused on reducing prescriptive language once again here. Edits were also made to improve clarity and consistency without altering the original intent or direction of the policies. No major shifts in policy direction are proposed. The foundational priorities established in the original draft remain intact. However, these refinements help ensure that the OCP remains practical, implementable, and aligned with the district's broader policy landscape. And 2 parts on this slide. So part 5 establishes council's statutory authority under the LGA to consider and issue temporary use permits for land uses that are not otherwise permitted by the zoning bylaw. These permits can be used to support interim uses, innovation, or site-specific needs that are consistent with the OCP's overall direction. In terms of updates, the only change here is minor language update to ensure the section references the current provisions of the LGA. For part 6, this provides a framework for implementing the policies and actions identified throughout the OCP. So it includes a summary of actions in table form that are linked to specific policy areas from earlier sections of the document aligned with the OCP's vision and goals. This section helps guide ongoing decision-making, budgeting, and cross-departmental coordination, ensuring that the OCP moves from policy to action over time. In terms of key changes, we've added clarifying language to reinforce how implementation may occur. For example, through future budgets, capital planning, or interdepartmental initiatives. And these edits do not introduce new content, but are intended to make the process of implementation more transparent. Part 7 of the OCP outlines the purpose and application of development permit areas, or DPAs, which are one of the key tools for guiding site-specific development. DPAs help ensure development aligns with the OCP objectives for form and character, environmental protection, and climate resilience, including greenhouse gas emissions and conserving water and energy. These designations only apply in specific areas for specific purposes, and the OCP includes a set of exemptions for minor development activities that don't trigger a permit. The OCP currently includes 10 development permit areas that address a range of issues from multifamily and commercial form and character to steep slopes and riparian areas. In terms of proposed edits, we've added and refined exemptions to reduce regulatory burden and clarify when a permit is and isn't required. We've also improved language clarity to support more consistent interpretation across development applications. And finally, we flagged future consideration the possibility of consolidating some of the form and character DPAs where appropriate to simplify the framework and improve usability. Moving on to statutory requirements. Bill 44, which passed in 2023, introduced significant changes to the Local Government Act that directly affect how municipalities plan for their housing in their OCPs. The legislation requires municipalities to align land use designations with provincial expectations for small-scale multi-unit housing, such as triplexes and fourplexes, particularly in areas designed for single-family housing. It also mandates that OCPs accommodate the full 20-year housing needs identified in each community's housing needs report. For Sooke, that translates to approximately or exactly 4,737 new units over the next 2 decades. In addition, OCPs must include policies that address a broad spectrum of housing needs. This includes 7 provincially defined categories, including affordable, special needs, seniors, shelter, transitional, and supportive housing. Finally, there's an explicit requirement to consider proximity to sustainable transportation options, supporting climate goals and transit-oriented development. Continuing on, while Bill 44 introduces new requirements, it's important to note that many of these elements are already incorporated into the OCP bylaw, which received second reading in 2022. For example, under Part 3, the community residential land use designation already supports housing typologies that meet the definition of SMU, that is ground-oriented residential buildings with up to 4 units per lot. The land use plan is also understood to have the capacity to accommodate the 20-year housing need as is without any changes. However, Section 4.9 policies have been added to reflect all 7 categories of housing need identified by the legislation. The housing policies were ensured to align with the district's housing needs report, ensuring consistency with both local data and legislative expectations. The one component, skipped ahead here. These components described here place the district in a strong position to comply with Bill 44 with only minor adjustments needed to meet the requirements. Yeah, so during the 2022-23 public hearing and related committee discussion, several key themes emerged from community and stakeholder feedback. Right, one of the main concerns was the expanded use of development permit areas, particularly in relation to their complexity, clarity, and potential permitting burden. Others noted that the language throughout the document could be simplified and that the overall length of the OCP made it challenging to navigate. There were also questions about the implications of the growth strategy around density, infrastructure capacity, and service delivery. Some residents and council and committee members identified inconsistencies in mapping as well. And finally, there were concerns about the cost of implementing the actions outlined in the OCP, especially those requiring interdepartmental or long-term investment. These concerns were carefully reviewed and many have been addressed through preliminary changes to the working draft where feasible. These edits aim to strike a balance between improving clarity and maintaining the strategic direction of the OCP. The next slides will consider some key draft edits to address these points. However, please refer to the red line document and table of changes attached to the report for complete edits. Drink of water here. Yeah, so as part of the OCP review, we identified the need for stronger policy guidance within the DPA sections to better support forming character, climate action, and environmental objectives. During earlier engagement, including the public hearing and committee discussions, feedback raised concerns that the expanded use of DPAs felt overly bureaucratic and potentially burdensome for applicants. Important to note is that there are many parallels in terms of DP triggers between the current OCP bylaw 400 and the draft bylaw 800, although the current bylaw, in our opinion, lacks detailed policy guidance needed to ensure consistent and transparent application. As a result, the working draft includes several refinements. For example, we've identified a potential opportunity to consolidate the town center core and waterfront DPAs into a single streamlined DPA to reduce duplication and improve clarity. We also plan to include supporting imagery in a clean version of the bylaw to help visually explain key concepts. And while no DPAs have been removed at this point, the draft does include refined exemption criteria as well to provide more clarity on when a permit is and isn't required, and general language improvements throughout to support a better understanding and implementation. This slide outlines key updates to the DP exemption section of the OCP. That would be section 7.1.2. So parts have been revised to apply a consistent set of base exemptions across all DPAs. Exemptions that were specific to only one DPA were moved into their applicable sections for clarity. A notable and more significant proposed change relates to form and character exemptions. Now, staff are recommending to exempt residential buildings up to 4 units from a form and character development permit, specifically under DPA 6, 7, and 8, and also DPA 1, which addresses energy, water conservation, and greenhouse gas reduction. This recommendation is based on recent provincial policy direction, which encourages streamlining approval processes for SMU housing. These types of buildings, such as triplexes and fourplexes, would still be subject to environmental DPAs, such as riparian or steep slope areas where applicable. This exemption helps align development procedures with provincial policy guidance to reduce barriers for SMU housing, but maintains environmental protection where needed. It is also realistic in terms of staffing capacity to otherwise manage a potentially substantial number of development applications while maintaining a high standard of service delivery. Building on the previous slide, one additional exemption being proposed to support streamlined permitting includes general exemption for environmental DPAs if the applicant provides a report from a qualified environmental professional confirming that no environmentally sensitive features are present on the site. This approach is intended to reduce unnecessary permit requirements in cases where environmental constraints may have been identified in mapping but not present in reality. The recommendation is consistent with the existing exemption framework in DPA 4, riparian areas as drafted, which already recognizes that mapping may not always accurately reflect on the ground conditions. By extending this exemption more broadly to other environmental DPAs, as well as steep slopes, we can ensure that development is only subject to permits where there's a clear environmental rationale. One of the consistent themes from earlier feedback was around the length of the document and the clarity of its language. So in response, we've made clarifying edits throughout the OCP to improve plain language, remove redundancies, and ensure policies are more accessible to readers. We've also revised areas with overly prescriptive language, particularly within the development permit areas and policy sections, to allow for more flexibility in implementation without altering the intent. We did explore options to significantly reduce the length of the OCP, but found that by doing so would risk weakening the policy framework and the internal structure that supports decision-making. Instead, to address usability, we plan to publish the final OCP in distinct sections on the district's website. This will make it easier for residents, applicants, and staff to navigate and access the parts most relevant to them. There may also be opportunities to consider reducing page count without sacrificing important content, through reformatting and creating a clean version. A few final updates to note relate to mapping revisions and implementation concerns. So all maps within the OCP are being updated using the most current available data with support from the district's GIS team. One specific change includes the removal of a proposed future trail crossing the Sooke First Nation lands following feedback and recognition of jurisdictional boundaries. In terms of implementation, we heard concerns about the cost of implementing the actions identified in the OCP. Now, it's important to clarify that these actions are intended to serve as a guiding framework. The detailed design, costing, and timing of individual actions will be determined through future planning, capital projects, and annual budgeting. The OCP outlines a long-term growth strategy to 2050, providing direction on how the community grows while ensuring alignment with infrastructure planning, housing needs, and climate targets. Ultimately, implementation will rely on cross-departmental alignment, ongoing monitoring, and partnerships with both external agencies, First Nations, and senior levels of government. These elements position the district to take a phased and strategic approach to implementing the OCP over time. And finally, the 2022 Climate Action Plan was adopted after the original OCP draft was brought to Council. Therefore, one of the goals of this update was to ensure policy alignment between the two documents. This draft OCP now includes updated references to the Climate Action Plan, acknowledging its adoption and ensuring consistency in climate-related goals and actions. One key update in Section 4 includes updated language that encourages accelerated adoption of higher step code levels, while still allowing flexibility for council to determine timing based on local readiness and priorities. We've also removed outdated timeline references as these have passed and no longer reflect current implementation practices. These changes ensure that the OCP remains current, implementable, and aligned with the district's broader climate commitments. Now shifting gears to the engagement plan. We're calling the final phase of engagement Picture Sooke the final frame, to build on the established Picture Sooke branding that was used throughout the OCP process to maintain consistency and community recognition. The engagement plan attached to the report provides a clear and structured approach to guide how we share information and gather feedback as we move toward OCP bylaw adoption. The key component of this will be, a key component of this will be education. We want to ensure that the community understands the purpose of the OCP, the history of the update process, and the legislative changes that have shaped the working draft. We also aim to proactively address misinformation and ensure that residents, stakeholders have clear, accurate information ahead of the public hearing. The main engagement objectives include telling the story of the OCP update, what's changed, what hasn't, and why, to gather focused feedback on the updated draft, where edits have been made in response to previous feedback and new provincial requirements, and to ensure the process is transparent and accessible and that it stays on track. This phase is about reinforcing trust, providing clarity, and giving residents a final meaningful opportunity to engage with the OCP before it's presented again for readings. Yeah, this final phase of engagement is planned to run from the end of August through September, lasting approximately 4 weeks. The process will be guided by a communications strategy, ensuring consistent messaging, clear information, and broad outreach across platforms. A range of engagement opportunities will be offered to reach both general residents and targeted stakeholder groups, including a dedicated engagement website to host background materials, FAQs, and a clean version of the updated draft, an online survey to provide an easy way for residents to share feedback on key themes, a development community meeting to ensure builders, developers, and consultants have a forum to ask questions and provide input, a public open house and a virtual open house to provide accessible in-person and online options to the general public, as well as community pop-up sessions. Currently, we're scheduled for 4 in locations around town to gather input and in a more informal setting. The engagement period will conclude with the What We Learned report, summarizing key themes and how feedback will inform any final refinements to the OCP. Regarding next steps, to support the upcoming engagement phase, staff will prepare a clean version of the working draft in addition to the existing redline version and table of changes. During the engagement and referral period, we'll gather feedback from both the public and key stakeholders, including external agencies and First Nations. After engagement concludes, staff will consolidate the feedback and present a What We Learned report and identify any additional changes that may be warranted based on what we hear. If further changes are recommended, they will be brought forward to the LUDC and then council for direction. Once finalized, the updated bylaw will be presented to council for a reread of second reading, reflecting the scope of statutory and other changes since the original version was considered. This will be followed by a public hearing and subject to council's direction, third reading and adoption. This process ensures that the updated OCP is responsive to both community feedback and current legislative requirements while maintaining transparency at each step. And with that, staff are recommending that the LUDC recommend that council direct staff to initiate a final round of public consultation on the draft OCP bylaw number 800, using the working draft provided with the report as attachment 3, and in accordance with the engagement plan outlined in attachment 1. This concludes my presentation. Staff are available with any questions. I also have Holden Blue on my right here, who is the project lead and our senior planner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Riley. And that was a lot of information. Take a drink. Hope that's water. All right. At this point in time, the recommendation that we have in front of us is fairly innocuous. It's simply to move forward with the process. So let's just all keep that in mind. And at this time, I would like to actually ask personally staff a few questions that might actually help the committee just in terms of how we want to move forward. So one of my concerns at this point in time, and this is having been on the previous land use committee, this will not be this committee's final kick at the can, will it?
That's correct. So once we do finalize our engagement phase of this project, we'll come back to the committee with a what we learned report and present on those matters, as well as potentially any additional changes based on the feedback that we hear.
Thank you very much. I have a further question for staff at this point in time. I don't know about anybody else, but I personally find that there's an immense amount of detail, of course, in the OCP, and that actually going through it carefully as a whole is virtually impossible in terms of, for example, having a meeting like this, we need 3 hours to go over one section. I'm going to suggest that in order for make best use of this committee in terms of input that we can provide, it might be useful for us to discuss the possibility of going through, when the time comes, one section at a time. I know there's been, asks on the part of committee members sometimes to have more meetings or whatever. I don't know what that might look like, but I'm just going to float that out there that I personally would appreciate the chance to go over different sections, one section at a time, because as a whole, the document is an awful lot to digest. And I don't know how we can have meaningful conversation on, other than the structure of the document, on the details in the document. So I'll put you on the list. And actually,
Can I just respond to that, please?
Please do.
So I'm hearing what you're saying. I think, but we do have a timeline to consider as well. So depending on how you see that being structured, of course, direction should come from council on how we proceed with this. But our engagement plan would basically be coming to the committee with a single meeting following engagement and then flowing to council basically for direction to then proceed with readings. And once we get to the readings phase, the committee would not be involved any further. It would be a reread of second reading, then public hearing, and then back to council for third and fourth. Council could direct staff to make further changes to the document, but basically the committee here is not basically a working committee for the OCP. It would be a committee just basically as a touch point before we proceeded to council, as we're basically framing this as a final phase of engagement and not necessarily rehashing the entire document.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that we're on a tight timeline and we have, legislative requirements to actually get the OCP in on time, and that we don't want to redo the entire document. Having said that, I think that my experience was that we could have avoided a lot of heartache on the previous attempts on the OCP if we'd actually made better use of the Land Use Development Committee at that point in time. There's always a lot of talent in the room. I think that we can discuss different modalities in terms of how to move forward. My off-the-cuff thought, and this is just right off the top, would be that if at each land use committee meeting before it actually, for example, we don't need a draft version that's had the public's input to comment on, because we're not expecting a huge number of changes necessarily. And right now, most of the details are there. So if at every following meeting, we were to discuss one section and everybody knew, go over that one section, bring forward what you have, make it available to staff, that can become part of the process, as opposed to we're going to rubber stamp it through the land use committee when the draft is ready, which I think is almost a waste of our time, to be perfectly honest, because at that point in time, we don't have time to go through it at all. And at this point, I will open that up for discussion. I mean, we are going to be obviously, probably moving the recommended motion, but.
Yeah, I don't want to put through the chair, comment is that I don't want to put, the cart before the horse here. We're making a request that we go out to the public. The public wanted some more input. Everybody at this table can go to those gatherings and put their input to it. If everybody has an interest in a certain part of the OCP, like yourself, Mr. Chairman, go to one of these meetings and make sure it's put out there. I don't personally, I'm very pleased with the way staff has tackled this. I know, again, it's we're never going to make everybody happy, but to me, there's been a lot of concessions. We've had to put in, the staff has had to put in all these new regulations put in by the government, which is no small task, and I appreciate that. But if anybody has any concerns about it, we have ample opportunity as an individual to put those thoughts known. So when it comes back, that we have that complete document as it possibly can be. To go over it piecemeal at this committee and then council, will be doing it in 2095, for God's sake. So, I mean, somewhere along the line, we have to, we've consulted with the public. We've got an excellent staff looking at it, and then we go with what we have. So I'm a little concerned about dragging this out.
Thank you, Councilor Meadows. Councilor Pearson.
So question to staff, procedurally, where are we? We've got, through the chair, I'd like to know, we've got, I believe, first and second reading. Now we're going to amend the document significantly. Where are we at procedurally if we're going to make amendments in the document?
Yes, so through the chair, we would be going back to rescind and reread second reading as amended. And then that would bring us forward to public hearing once again. So because of the changes being substantive and because it's the OCP as well, a good procedure would be to bring it back, rescind, reread, and move forward with public hearing, third reading, and so on.
And at that time, there would be a public hearing.
Correct. There would be another public hearing if we went back to second reading. Yes.
Okay. I have a couple more questions, but I'll defer it, but yes, come back to me.
Councilor Bateman.
Okay, thank you. First, thank you for the work you put into this, and it's great to see the red line document and see some critical. As I recall, there was such a range of input, public input into this document, but of course we focus in on the most critical, of course, always, and there was the matter of this. The thou shalt language within the document. So you caught that. Could you tell me about the necessity of removing prescriptive language and making it conditional?
Yeah, so removal of prescriptive language basically allows for there to be, innovation, for us to be more flexible and still have discretion, I suppose, with those policy statements, rather than them reading like action items. Obviously, the document stands over the course of 10, 15 years and priorities can change, et cetera. So it does provide us more flexibility in terms of being able to pivot as the organization does.
Thank you.
Now, the action plan. Can I carry on?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
I thought you were
I'll
done.
use my 5 minutes. The action plan also has been given a conditional nature. We're not costing out or intending to do exactly these 118 actions over the course of the lifespan. There, that's a statement, and I didn't ask a question again. I'm interested. The hidden density issue also came up, and there was that confusion over the FAR understanding. And I see you've included here a clarification point under community residential. Tell me about that. I won't tell you what it is, so you'll answer my question.
Sorry, can you elaborate on that, on the community
Okay,
residential?
so there is the confusion that perhaps there could be up to 70 units per hectare throughout the district of Sooke. And you've now yeah.
Yeah, so we recognize that there needed to be an exception in the case of SMU housing. So we have the smallest lot size we have currently is 350 square meters in the R3 zone. So moving forward with small lots like that, you'd eventually reach a density that exceeded 70 units per hectare. So we had to create an exemption of some kind, and I think we have an asterisk presented in the working draft that just does say that there are some exemptions for single lot development related to up to 4 units of housing. Yeah. So through the chair, so yeah, we did realize there was some misinformation, I think, that was kind of spreading around the community before, and the document was amended to include a 15-meter setback is probably the wrong language, but it was basically encouraging through the guidelines of the DPA that no development would occur within 15 meters. The zoning bylaw also has a 15-meter setback, so there's maybe a little bit of confusion there. It wouldn't be a variance necessary that's guided through the DP itself, but what we do is have as a foreshore development permit area that would be triggered for any development on foreshore property. And then we would look at the guidelines to be implemented, unless they're exempt, to ensure that they're out of that area with exceptions. That's what, of course, DPs are guidelines as well. So not all, it's very site specific, site dependent sometimes. So not all the guidelines necessarily have to be met depending on the existing conditions of the property, but that would be something considered by staff and potentially council at decision making time.
I'll
Member Ritz?
It's on, I think. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. I really appreciated the redlined approach. And actually, I didn't feel there were all that many significant changes. So, I mean, this document, I was chair of the OCP advisory committee, and this document did go to second reading, and there was ample time for council to be involved. They attended a lot of our committee meetings. So I was really impressed. That I thought there were great edits. So thank you for that. And the redlining made it super easy to read. You know, I do have a few things, and I like Councillor Beto's idea of really maybe me participating as just a general public person and writing this in, but maybe I could ask you a couple questions through the chair. Would that be all right? Under key messaging, I think I'd like to add what is an OCP and why it matters as the first one, because I think a lot of people don't understand what an official community plan is and why it's necessary to have and all that. So if there could just be, if we could start there, I think it would be helpful. Under audience types, I felt we were maybe missing a parks and trails and recreation group, because there's the bike trail, there's various parks groups that I'm involved in, there's a trail club and things like that. So I felt maybe that was an audience missing. It says the third reading and adoption of this plan will be January 6th. Is that correct? Does it have to be by December 31st?
Good catch. Yeah, through the chair. So even with our timeline as presented, we realized we're without a special council meeting, we would be looking at adopting this the first council meeting in January. Similar to SMU, I suppose we do have provincial deadlines that are in place. They're more focused than what we're presenting here. We're looking at entire more broad document changes with the inclusion of those statutory requirements. Yeah, I think our priority here is making sure we do this right and not necessarily within the timeline, but we also don't want to drag our heels, so to speak. Yeah, so it's likely to be adopted after December 31st deadline. Yes.
May I ask a couple more? On page 153, Town Center Waterfront, the floor area ratio, I think that is, or it's for the 6 stories, it's 5.0, and other 6-story ones are 2.5. So I didn't understand how 2 6 stories could be different in FAR. I don't know if it's page 153.
I'll take a crack at it. I mean, through the chair, not understanding kind of the rationale, maybe from previous staff members, but kind of what comes to mind is typically kind of that focus of the higher FAR, higher density in this priority kind of commercial corridor along Brownsea Boulevard. That's where this would apply. So generally speaking, I mean, FAR is considered for varying kind of lot sizes, et cetera, et cetera. So it really is just a way to sort of still allow for unique kind of style of development, given the sort of emphasis on both commercial and residential and vision along Brownsea Boulevard. Again, I'd have to do a little bit of digging to see if I could pull up the previous information to see why it's differentiated, because you can still achieve 6 stories through varying FARs, but I mean, it would depend on site conditions, et cetera.
And I'll just add to that as I handed off that question so I could think a little bit. But basically, I mean, FAR is massing of a lot, right? I mean, it's not height. Height is part of it. So you could have a 6-story building that's certainly more mass on a property than it would be at 2.5. So I think that's where we're looking at breaking up that massing a little bit more in the town core, where the waterfront and our Waterview Way main corridor in the town center would be something more substantial just along that main corridor there that could look like the more the major city, large, buildings that take up a lot of space. So hopefully that makes somewhat sense, but kind of thinking on the fly a little bit.
May I continue? One more, okay, ooh, make it count. Oh, and there's reference to the town center plan as being one of the first steps, a short-term step. How would that fit into, because you have the OCP as, we called it the umbrella document and everything fits in below. So that if we do a town center plan, would we then have to update the OCP to, if the town center plan is a, I don't know, completely different document or different
no,
vision?
we wouldn't have to update the OCP. I think we've kept the policy and objectives in the OCP broad enough to allow for innovation and flexibility. And the town center plan would just provide that extra layer of guidance for us to be planning our town center, I guess, with a fresh lens since the 2009 plan.
Yes, thank you. On the part 3, when we were doing the overview, we didn't get to look at the map of the land use map. And I didn't get a blown up version of that to see exactly what that was all about. But it appeared to me there was a lot of development all going down in front of the Edward Milne School, right through down to Cecino's Elementary School. Is that correct? I didn't get to have a look at
Yeah,
that.
so through the chair, land use in that area would be the gateway residential land use designation. So this provides for limited opportunities for residential growth because of the servicing, lack of servicing in the area, and also some commercial in the area as well, neighborhood commercial, so smaller scale commercials. That's what you see. I forget the color of what it would be, but you'll see a kind of a larger area that's gateway residential. Orange, is it? Yeah, towards the east of our growth boundary and district boundary.
Okay, so that's going to
Did that answer the question, sorry?
Slightly. So that's going to be incorporated into the zoning bylaws as well, or just the OCP?
Yeah, so the OCP would guide future land uses, and then the zoning bylaw, when someone would seek to develop or rezone their land to develop, it would have to be in accordance with the OCP future land use. So that's what we're trying to achieve, essentially. So both are regulatory documents. In accordance with legislation, you have to be consistent with the OCP designation. So obviously, if it's more substantive and not aligned with that future vision of land use, then there would have to be an OCP amendment, and that would, no matter what, have to come to council for consideration because it would be considered a substantial change or a veer from what our plan is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, no, thank you, staff, for your work on this here. It is a very aggressive timeline as outlined here. And I'm just assuming that with adoption following into January of 26, it is just adoption. So council would be giving third hearing after a public hearing. So I'm just assuming that the province would be okay with that. Or in the absence of hitting a December 31st timeline, a special meeting could be called potentially because by then all the work is done. Like really, it is just adopting a bylaw. We typically don't debate that because we've done all the heavy lifting or the debating prior. So that may make sense at the time, depending. And then just for the benefit of committee members, like when this came forward to council previously, we did go through a lot of line by line items or page by page. And I see those edits in here. And it was just the timing, the advanced voting had already started. Our public hearing, over half of the public respondents in the hearing were council candidates. And we were also aware that the province was going to be coming out with items they wanted to see in OCPs. So if we had adopted it, it's like we'd have to open it up to meet those regulatory provincial directives and amend it. So for those reasons, not just because of the election, but because we were waiting for the legislation from the province, we needed to wait to be known because we'd have to do this work anyway. My only question though, and this is just they're just odd observations, but just a reminder that if you hit an acronym is to spell it out. So like C Park is in here as an acronym, but it doesn't actually say what it is. And the font changes. So at first it was my eyes, but it's in some of the headings and I just lost the page where it goes from caps to lower caps. And I would just recommend it would be one or the other because it doesn't seem to be consistent and it just, like I'm looking at 4.6 agriculture and food systems. It should all just be uppercase.
Yeah,
So I'm just nitpicking.
I
It's
can
not.
tweak that really quick, but it's a transfer of the document from an InDesign document to PDF. So it does have some weird digital artifacts, et cetera, that we just can't fix.
Really?
Basically. Well, we can. I mean, we could ask for a consultant to completely redesign the document, which we will do in the clean draft.
Okay.
But that it's very time consuming for the purpose of this report and the stage of the process. We've simply just converted an InDesign document to PDF.
Okay,
So-
but that's fine. But the
Yeah.
final draft will
Of-
actually have that all
absolutely.
cleaned up.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, because that's where we'll get sidetracked by like rising seals and the like, so. From the last seal level rises, but yeah, no, just for the final, as long as it's clean, that's great, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pearson, will you add something further?
Yeah. Couple areas and following along with the red line, and it was a lot of reading and of course it was July 1st long weekend. So DPA exemptions, and I kind of was struggling with the DPA exemptions. Where does the authority or the delegated authority rest with the DPA exemptions? Because again, when we're talking about exemptions, it's subject to that interpretation and it feels kind of incongruent with the rest of the document. For me.
Yeah, so
I appreciate why and a statement, but I guess I would like to see clarity on the inclusion of the exemptions.
yeah, so through the chair, it's best practice, very common to be exempting certain activities through DPs. You could be in a foreshore area, for example, and build a 10 square foot, addition to your deck, and that would trigger a development permit if you didn't have any exemptions, for example. So they can be incredibly onerous if you did not have them. So in that context, that's why they exist. And it's within our legal authority or council's legal authority to include them in its bylaws. We do also have a procedure bylaw, and in that case, that allows our director, Chris Marshall, who's online with us here as well, just as a reminder, to issue development permits under certain conditions established within the parameters outlined in the bylaw. So two different things, but in terms of like determining if a project or activity is exempt from a development permit, that would be at the discretion of staff. Yeah.
Okay, good answer. And I think that may alleviate some of the 10 DPA concerns that are out there. A couple of technical questions and in the presentation and in the document, it says that Sooke Trail, and is this the aspirational trail that went right around the harbor now is no longer showing on Sooke lands?
Through the chair, I believe, yes, that is correct. Through Sooke
Okay.
lands, just across the bridge, whatever those lands are. There was a map in the draft OCP showing an aspirational trail, future trail. And we received feedback from Sooke Nation that, and as Jade mentioned, recognizing jurisdictional boundaries, that was removed.
So then the second question is, and it's still remaining in the draft OCP that it's on the rest of the waterfront around the entire harbor?
So I think you're confusing, or sorry, through the chair, confusing the waterfront trail that's outlined in the Parks and Trails Master Plan.
Correct.
So there's no map with any sort of waterfront trail in the OCP.
Well, there's a red line that shows right around the entire harbor as an aspirational trail. Kind of, and that caused a lot of angst at the last presentation of last public input.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
For the last council.
Yes, fair. And I remember I did watch all those webcasts as well. So, but yes, if there is some sort of confusion there, we can certainly update our maps. We haven't updated them in this red line version at this stage. So we just made some notes that they will be updated, and they're intended to be consistent in some cases with our with other overarching plans that currently exist.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Holden, do you have something to add? No?
Yeah, I'll just add that a lot of those maps are existing in other district documents. So either from the Transportation Master Plan or Parks and Trails Master Plan.
Okay.
So it's in alignment with those documents.
And I would hope that we could somehow adjust that to reflect reality. And I can appreciate, securing waterfront trail and all of the things in certain areas. But it's going to, if it's not clear and there's maps out there, I think in the public engagement part, it needs to be. That's just a recommendation from me personally, but whether the council likes that or not, I don't know. And I have a question around Bill 44 and Bill 45, which are to be included in, because it feels like we're getting to crunch time again. If we weren't to meet our timelines, does the province have an avenue for saying we're working on it? And it could be because, I don't like to get to the 11th hour and say, okay, we got to ram it in to get it in just for the sake of getting it in. Does the province have an avenue for us to communicate with them to say, listen, our OCP is draft form, 44 and 45 are included.
Yeah, through the
Can you
chair.
pick up the phone and call?
Yeah, through the chair, our platform, other than I guess an email, there isn't like an official like extension process, but yeah, staff would certainly be in correspondence with the province, letting them know that things are moving along. I think that's really the only option we have at this stage. If we don't schedule a special council meeting, et cetera. So it's still possible we meet the deadline, but if not, then we have, I think, options.
Yeah, I've recently heard that there is some flexibility from the province as long as it's in process. Okay, but I haven't got it in writing and that's not my job.
Thank you. Anyone further? Okay, so
I was gonna do a round two.
and then I'll do a round one, I guess.
Oh, well, you go for your first time.
Okay, I have a number of questions more with the general format. First of all, I'd like to comment on the length of the document. And it looks like I can't really comment on it because I compared it to a list of the best OCPs in BC and it's about the same length. So despite the fact that it's way longer than I want, you're off the hook. Well done. Research shows you've actually got it in the range, and what can I say further, right? Damn it. Okay, so we're not gonna have a 100-page OCP, and that makes me sad. Having said that, we have a beautiful preface by the OCP committee that actually, in some ways, summarizes most of the intent of the document and what was received from the public. It was my thought that that could potentially be either used or reworked into essentially a Cole's notes of the OCP with reference and links to various other pieces of the document. If you want to know more about this, go there. If you want to know more about this, go there. So something that could actually allow someone to really get a quick sense of what is this all about without having to read 287 pages. So that'd be my first comment on that one. The other question that I had was how much time, because we don't have much time at all, or budget do we have for any sort of tweakings of this type? So is there time to actually do any work like this, or is it really just get the engagement as quick as possible, hand it off to a consultant to fix up the format, and let's get this done?
Yeah, through the chair. So we do have a budget that was endorsed or approved by council, $50,000 to work with. We do still have provincial funding to work with to make more edits than that were in the scope of our RFP and the proposal and our contract we have with our consultants. So those are the people that are doing the design and formatting changes. But I think we can certainly fit in some minor changes, but something more substantive would have to be reviewed and considered, I guess, against budget and timelines. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so I don't know if this will be minor, but it's something I've been asking for a while. Along with that potentially linked preface, if there was a chart that actually showed in very brief goals followed through by actions and so on and so forth, someone could capture very quickly not the details, not necessarily going into the actions, but just the flow. And they could just get that. And then again, with links to appendices that would actually have, for example, the actions and so on and so forth. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so just to speak with that, and I mentioned this in my presentation, but I think a lot of that will be alleviated through just how this document is presented online. We will have links to certain sections of the document, so you could jump into the implementation, part 6 of the document if you want. That will show the actions, or we would have the policy structure, which does have tables all throughout that does reference objectives and the policies, or so the goal areas and then the goals that flow from that and objectives as well. So it is in the document and it can be navigable with ease, in my opinion, through a good setup on the website.
I absolutely appreciate that because one of my next comments is about the website piece of it. My question is in terms of whether it would take a lot of work to get that going so that people that are not actually particularly website savvy have an easy way of actually capturing the essence of the document. So it's a request, and I think it's for those people that are just not that comfortable, still with going on a website. In terms of the website, I love the idea. I think it's brilliant, especially in terms of the information that's being presented. I would suggest that as the draft is probably out there, if we had some means of getting feedback from the public on the different sections as they go through, is that already in place?
Yes, so through the, once council directs staff to proceed in accordance with the engagement plan, and draft edits, we'll be setting up that website immediately. We're already doing work in the background right now to ensure that we can go live really quickly with that. And then we'll also have a survey available on that website with those sections broken down and opportunities for the public to provide comments.
Yeah, I think that would be excellent because I think that'll give you really solid information that can potentially be used, especially if it's not just, one thing at the end, but following each section, if embedded in each section, for example, community policies, and here's a place where you can actually say, well, like it or don't, or here's something you didn't think of. I think that would be valuable input from everyone. I think it'd be nice if you want to speak it.
No, I was, when you're finished.
Yep, absolutely.
Get your attention.
Nope.
Sometimes you're in a blind spot, just.
Absolutely. You're always in the blind spot. Where was I? Okay, in terms of the regional growth strategy from the CRD and the housing needs assessment, I don't know if within the document it's extraordinarily clear necessarily to the public, especially to those people who would like Sooke to stay small and not go at all anymore, that essentially the regional growth strategy plus the housing needs assessment essentially mean we must almost legally continue growing to a certain degree. And what we're trying to do now is manage that growth as best we can. And we want input on how to manage that growth, but we can't just stop it because the train has left the station. We can't stop it. So I don't know if that's something that we can actually include somewhere, but there was a lot of information on the regional growth strategy. There's a lot of information on the housing needs assessment, but maybe, somewhere in the preface or something, letting people know the reason why we have to plan for growth and why this is all about planning for growth is because it's baked in. And these are some of the things that are actually, dictating how it's baked in and how we're going to be dealing with it. So just a thought on that one, because I don't think a lot of people necessarily know. I think a lot of people think that council is all powerful and could just stop all this development from happening. Growth would stop and that'd be perfect. And realistically, we're just a little less powerful than that. So when I was looking at the DPAs, I found that if I was someone looking at development, I would be terrified. So anything that could be done about actually explaining. So my understanding at this point in time is that previously the process was such that essentially all the DPAs were essentially put together. And by not separating them out, any applicant had to go through every single piece. And at this point, you can actually have a checklist in a pre-application meeting and say, oh, these are the only pieces you need to go through. Let's save some time here. I don't know if that's made quite clear enough right at the outset. The 12 DPAs are not actually, or the DPAs are not actually multiplying the work. It's actually a checklist for seeing which work you actually need to do. Previously, all of this would have had to have been done. Now, we can actually take some of it away. So as clear as we can make that, I think it'll actually bring some comfort because right now, I looked at it and I was like, oh God. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks for making that point. And I think through the engagement in that education piece, it's going to be very critical for us to be explaining, especially with people that are familiar with our DPAs and will have very specific input, such as the development community. But I think staff also have some responsibility, and we currently are working towards improving this, but having guides available for the mom and pops developing their property, et cetera, to confirm. And of course, just as a customer service level, we look to provide that information and help people understand if their property is subject to a DP and what's actually exempt. But there's certainly some guiding documents and brochures that could be created alongside this. But as we go through engagement, I think we're going to be definitely touching on this from just an overarching kind of educational piece.
Yeah, and I would include that if you can actually include something like a test group, a beta test on the process and get some feedback before you roll it out full scale, that'd be nice. I don't know if it's possible or not, but getting a couple of applicants that are not, developers with their own planners to make it all work for them and so on. Just getting their sense of, okay, I started here. Here's why I hit some hiccups. Here's why I don't know what's going on. I need more clarity. I think it'd be quite useful to do something like that if it's possible. Okay, thank you very much. Councilor Beddoes.
Well, thank
you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Councillor Beddoes.
I'm sorry.
That's
I'm
okay.
gonna have to.
No worries. Thank you.
But I'm at the top and I'm saying you.
I'm in the blind spot. So audience analysis, thank you. So this public engagement process, we're going to see virtual and in-person open houses in mid-September, a community survey. You're going to have a scheduled stakeholder meeting with development community. And then I think it's very important that the community know that they can have stakeholder meetings by request. So how are you going to get that message out to the many, many groups in town?
Email.
Email. And what would a stakeholder meeting look like?
Yeah, so sorry, I was just in jest a little bit, but through the chair, we have a stakeholder mailing list of about 200 groups. So maybe not all of them have been listed in this document, but we will be sending out an email and certainly making ourselves available. We do kind of have a stock presentation. Basically, we would use something similar to this if necessary, but we would make the judgment call if there's maybe one or two individuals, depending on the scope of the questions, we would make ourselves available, Holden as well, just to answer any questions that residents had, and we would log that information as well.
Now, you've earlier said you will proactively address misinformation. So what does that look like? I mean, social media, for example, is a hotbed. The district does not engage in dialogue on social media. How will you deal with misinformation?
Again, I think it's through that education piece of our engagement plan. So we're aware through review of the webcasts of the past here, where the committee of the whole meetings took place. And again, we certainly noticed some of the themes which we talked about here today, and we tried to address that through the document itself. But sometimes we're not addressing items that essentially are misinformation because there's nothing to address, basically. So we would take those items and ensure that they're communicated clearly, because as I remember, staff did report following the committee of the whole meetings at another committee of the whole to basically address each one of those items that was brought up by the community residents. But there was maybe two individuals in chambers at the time. And I think, I forget which councillor was, but, oh, this would be great to share to the public was one of the comments. And that's what we basically intend to do here.
Okay, yes, indeed, there was some very strong, clear feedback for the misinformation back in October 22. I'm curious. Okay, here's one thing. The OCP and I think the province is saying the OCP and the zoning bylaw must be complete by the end of the year. Is that correct? And if so, how are we going to get that zoning bylaw revised in short order?
Yeah, through the chair, and thank you for that question. That's a good point. So the zoning bylaw would have to be adopted in essentially to accommodate that housing need, and only that housing need. And we've already adopted it this year in February to accommodate SMU. But then we would have to make sure that the land use and the zones itself would be able to accommodate that housing need, which in our estimation, it certainly can. Certainly can as is, as is. So no changes would have to be made, but we would look at bringing the zoning bylaw forward for adoption, considering the other changes that are occurring, not just the housing need, because that's what the province is mandating us to do, but for just basic congruence with the OCP document itself and the new land use designations.
So the sudden thought of pre-zoning came into my head, but I won't go there yet. But I wanted to note that the planning department is entirely new from when this document was produced. So perhaps through you to Mr. Marshall, if you're still out there, can you give us some feedback on what you and your team, some feedback on this current document and its utility for the district going ahead?
To Mr. Marshall, if
Yeah, hi. Yeah, no, you know, we are working under a time frame to get this document updated, and we did get direction from council back in January that we weren't, you know, starting over again, that we were taking the existing document and working with the document that we had, and if there were any specific changes that once talked through with everybody made sense, then certainly we would include them, and certainly the additions of the new legislation is a requirement, so that's being looked at. But I mean, from my perspective, I think the existing draft goes a long way to achieving the goals and objectives at the front, and the climate action plan that was put in place in 2022. I think it does meet a lot of those long-term development visions that the community has. So unless we hear something dramatically different when we go out to the community in August and September, I don't see you know, a big change in the direction of the document.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point, I'll ask any final, oh, Mr. Councilor Beddoes, well done. Well done. Well done. All right.
First of all, I just comment, I listened to a lot of stuff in this last half hour, which, you know, I didn't think had much to do with what we're supposed to be here for. But anyways, the citizens and the developers will have an opportunity to make recommendations to this document, and that's great. And staff will make every effort to explain all the nuances of it, and that's good. So at this time, I'd like to make a motion that the Land Use and Development Committee recommend that council direct staff to initiate a final round of public consultations on the draft Official Community Plan, OCP, bylaw number 800, using a working draft that reflects the proposed preliminary edits outlined in attachment 3, and to proceed with consultation in accordance with the proposed engagement plan outlined in attachment 1, prior to bringing the bylaw forward for council consideration of any amendments. That's my motion.
Member Seconder? Member Ritz? Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Oh, all right, hold on. That was quicker.
I will support the motion to get to council, but when it gets to council, I will not be recommending that we go forward with it, the communication in August and September, due to the fact that August is a holiday month and September and October are, people are back to work. Community engagement feels to me you should be doing it in, I'm just bringing it up as a point. I will be discussing that at council meeting, because I think it's appropriate that we do it. There was a lot of angst over the last OCP and the last rendition of it. It's a very wieldy or unwieldy document. And I think that we have to pay attention to our community engagement.
So noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Ritz?
I would just like to say that the public engagement feedback is included in our current OCP. And then also, I believe on our website, you can get a lot of the feedback that we did over the last 2-3 years. And it is almost identical. people want the same thing that they wanted 15 or 20 years ago. So I kind of agree. I don't think there'll be any big surprises coming forward. I think we've done a great job. It's consistent with our current OCP. It's not actually that much different. So just to make that statement.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. Any new business? Motion to adjourn, anyone? Oh, there we go. Councillor Meadows, anyone second? Anyone at all? Member Ritz, all in favor? Wow, I'm gonna pull you out of here. Motion carries, we're adjourned. Thank you.